All right, just all this down here. Get a voice check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, Dan, I'm not going to be here this weekend, so actually Garfield kind of nailed it. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Voice check, 1, 2, 3. So here's the dealio. You can look at this pretty picture, or you can see the real me. Your choice. Fan's choice. So the short story is, the short version is, Garfield actually nailed it earlier. He said, we do this to watch paint dry. I was literally watching paint dry, and I was like, I can't do anything else, which is kind of, I was getting ready to make my evening video. I didn't make one this morning because I had things going on, and I said, I'm going to do this video, talk about, and you know what? I'm not going to have a live stream this weekend. Why not just, we'll pop it out here. We'll just go as long as anybody feels like going, an hour or so, or half hour, whatever we feel like. And so here we are. So kind of in lieu of the normal evening live stream, I'll just talk about what I did today, and you guys, we can talk about anything else you want to, because this is all for kicks and giggles, and no one's keeping score. So I was working on these Douglas World Cruisers today, and the first one, this one, which is the one that's going to have the wheels on it, already has the wheels on it, actually went together without too much argument. But the rest of them, putting the struts in, oh, good Lord, I do have a free hanging strut on this. Man, that makes all four of them I've got to fix. These struts keep popping out. If you can notice, there's not a lot of plastic for the purchase, for the glue to lock into, and they keep popping out. And I taken some pictures, but anyway, so what I've learned is I can put one strut at a time, make sure it's generously glued, put a little weight on it, and let it sit for about 3 or 4 hours till I know it's got a good solid bond. And so I'm having to do each one. And of course you do all 4 airplanes, but it's one strut at a time. So it takes you, and then another strut will pop off. And it's just like, it's like playing whack-a-mole with these things. And so it's taken all day. Ooh, I got blurry all of a sudden. What I got in here. But anyway, so I also started first bit of rigging today. You can sort of see it. And what I did was I took easy line and I tied a loop around those 2 struts, got them up in place, tack glued them. So because it is double wired, everything except for the cabane struts and between the uprights, all of the angular struts there's 2 wires in each one. So just tying a loop makes it easier to get them into place. This one will be on its one wheel and one float, showing getting changed. One will be on its floats on like a dolly to get in the water, and the other one will be in the water. So we'll see all the various phases. Fortunately, I have been able to salvage most of the decals. Hopefully I won't have to order any more. But the tails have those blue stripes on them. The angle stripes, so the guy in the back seat could tell the pilot how much wind drift they have. I'm thinking I may draw those on instead of use the decals, depending on how delicate they are. But it's been we're now, I thought this would go fairly quickly. It hasn't. It's been a very tedious, slow process. I had to remix some more paint because after I glue everything in place, the glue, it was very obvious. I thought I was saving time by pre-painting everything, and that's great for the fuselage. The way these wings have gone, I might as well have just waited till they were on the airplane to paint them. And I've started using the brush to give it sort of, because the nice thing about an airbrush is you get a nice smooth look, but it almost looks too good and too smooth. So using the brush to apply the new paint, and it gives it more of that weathered, this thing's been out in the sun look, which I like. But at least the top of the wing, this yellow, has been okay. So that's how that's going, and progress is being made, but no rush. That was really all the building I did today. I had to go to the doctor today, and the good news, I'm still alive. But that ate up the morning. And went by and saw Ian today at Hurricane Hobbies, and they Good news is that, believe it or not, he said business picked up, right? Things have been kind of slow, and business picked up right after the hurricane. I think everybody was like, hey, the hurricane missed us. Yay, celebrate. Go to the hobby shop. And he sold one of those today. He sold one of those lighthouses. And he was unboxing some stuff, and just a small order, so I didn't bother to try to make a video out of it or anything. But one of the things he had was the creature from the Black Lagoon repop. It didn't fit on the shelf. And they were like, what do we, what do we, that didn't fit on the shelf? And I said, and I should have taken a picture, but I have the Lighthouse and the Godzilla both up on top of a shelf when people come and they see them. So I'm like, and he tells people when they come in and look at one or the other, they really go together good. You ought to get both, And I just stuck the creature from the Black Lagoon up between them and said, now we have Monster Corner. And when you walk into the shop on the left, it's standing up where you can see it. And we all know that those kits kind of grab kids' attention. And I'm happy to see that there are still some kids in there shopping for models. I'm leery about talking to them because, middle-aged man talking to a kid at a toy store. Probably best I just say, it's a good kit, kid, and let it go. Funny, one of the things he has in stock is that SR-71 that I just built, the Revell one. I was telling him, if anybody's interested, tell him it's a good kit. It really is a good kit. A tiny little bit of flash on it. No real problem with fitting anything. Probably could have gotten a better glue bond on the rear end. I had to go back and fix that after I'd painted it. But, and of course I made it wheels up. I think that's one of the better kits I've built. It wouldn't be a bad if somebody, wants to get into model building. I guess you could call it a beginner kit. And the nice thing is that if you got some kid who just wants to build a model, builds it in black, puts the decals on it, it still looks good. Good enough to put on your shelf. So and that brought up a question. Okay, go to a hobby shop. What kits would you recommend? To someone who's getting into the hobby, and most of the Atlanta stuff would probably make that list. But 42 people with nothing better to do. I prefer to think of it as 42 people who are sharp enough to be here, that have a rich enough life that they can kind of enjoy this. So, bought 3 new airbrushes lately, 2 Pashes and 1 off of Amazon. Well, that one that was given to me by Glue Trooper recently is really good for painting fine lines. I still have my Badger, although it's not hooked up to the machine. And, of course, I got my large WHUDDEVAH, which is good for, larger stuff. You get right down to it. If you're going to have a permanent build area and you have the space and resources, it doesn't hurt to have about 3 airbrushes, one set up for narrow, one set up for mid, and one set up for widescreen on tap, because that's a great little time saver. And if you can get my late friend Bill Henry Donovan, the gentleman I bought the Mustang from, he had he was big into reloading ammunition, and still got paint all over my fingers. And he had his dies and everything set up for reloading all these different calibers, and they were permanently set up. So he never, except for just minor adjustments from wear and tear, he never had to change anything, kept them clean. And that's really nice if you can do that with, if you have the facility to do that with an airbrush, because taking them off, putting them back on, playing with them, that's what kind of wears them out. But if you can leave one permanently hooked up with a good seal, as long as you run the cleaner through it and everything, you should be okay. But Steve Arnold, no, I don't think Steve has a website. Now a reminder, of course I won't be here this week, but Jim Keeler's supposed to be with us in a week from Saturday. We're all looking forward to that, and that show will have some preparation done and everything for it, because you get someone like Jim. He is a national resource in the kit model world, and I'm interested to see how he's doing with his block of wood that he turned into an amazing model of Craig Breedlove's Spirit of America. So anywho, but that was all the modeling I got done today, and I still haven't taken my shiny new God's Hands clippers out yet. I haven't needed them, but I'm probably going to put them in there with take them out to the Tarvis. And I haven't done anything that required it yet, but I've got this AK plastic putty which everybody swears by. I'm anxious. I'm going to go find something that needs a camo paint job, start spraying on it. And it comes in this plastic bag. And I don't know if you're supposed to keep it in the plastic bag once you take it out. Only opened it one time, just the green slime, the brown slime. And when I first saw the name, it says AK Camouflage Plastic Putty. And I thought, oh, why would they make the putty in camouflage color? Blonde moment. Of course, it's for painting camouflage, get that nice feathered edge. But here it is, and it looks like, it looks kind of like old chewing tobacco, but there it just mashes right out. I'm really looking forward to playing with new toy. The green slime. Steve, was it you that sent me the green slime toy link for about $25? Somebody finally came up with a really cool toy, the green slime monster. And I was thinking, I know this channel isn't wide, but whoa, come back here. Because yelling at something you drop always helps. Have you ever done this? You're working on something and you back up a little bit, and that's when it drops and, of course, misses the table and goes on the floor because you lean back. But anyway, that movie was made in the 60s, and it's still people are making toys of it, you know. I'm telling you, that's a movie needs to be remade. Modern special effects. The storyline is actually, you know, minus the, oh, look, a asteroid's heading for Earth. We've got 4 hours to destroy it, and boom, oh, look. Like, how fast do their ships go? And the paper mache rock heading at you. But, God, I would love to do it. If MSTK 3000 didn't do that movie, they missed a golden opportunity. Really, though, the basic storylines, you know, pretty cool. Kind of, was it Planet of the Vampires versus, you know, mixed with Armageddon there. So, the carpet can eat anything, yes. The carpet monster can feed on anything. My wife and I watched The Green Lantern the other day again, and I don't know why, but you watch it a couple more times, and except for the whole racetrack scene, it actually isn't that bad of a movie. Of course, bad enough that Ryan was, you know, panning it in his Deadpool movie. But anyway, so we're watching The Green Lantern, and just being who I am and how I think, with that glowy green uniform, I just keep thinking, the green slime, the green slime. Because that's what his uniform is. It's like, his uniform's made up of the green slime. By the way, I saw the trailer Godzilla -1, the new Toho movie, not the Legendary. And, you know, if I'd taken 5 minutes before this is all a last second thing. I mean, I was literally watching glue dry and paint dry. I got bored, and I was going, I should make my evening video. I'm like, yeah, what the heck? Let's just do a live stream. So, like you said, OT, literally watching paint dry. So here we are. But I saw the trailer to the new Godzilla movie, and it looks good. It looks like the original, post World War II Japan. And they had the scene where you see the railroaders, and he biting the train, and like right off the box art. And I'm thinking, okay, that's got to be inspired by the original, and I'm not sure it was inspired by the box art because it's a famous studio photo. I'm looking forward to it. Excellent special effects. It's on par with Shin Godzilla, and it's a new Godzilla, and he has sort of a Shin Godzilla / old Godzilla look. He's not as big as Shin. One thing I like is you see him walking down the street, and he's stepping on people, you know, squash the bugs, and anywho, that's I think it comes out in December. So, did you guys know when Shin Godzilla first came out, it only did limited run in the U.S. Me and Ken went to go see it at a theater down in South Florida, and there was only one showing. I don't know why it was so restricted. And we got there like, oh no, we're not showing it tonight. I think they didn't sell enough tickets. I guess we'll try doing some promotion. But so they were going to show that movie about the exploding oil rig with Mark Wahlberg. And I was like, nah, we'll go do something else. But So anyway, let me read a few comments here. No, not this time, but sometimes I do. But and I hope they come out with a kit of it also. Yeah, that's again, talking about kits. There's a bunch of versions of Godzilla that plenty of toys and models made, but not and the legendary stuff. There's no actual. I mean, there might be some garage stuff, but there's no actual kits of them made that I'm aware of. Yeah, I wasn't in love with the animated one. There were a few things about it I liked, but the uh, the Godzilla movies are just good. The first one did carry kind of a heavy message. The rest of them are just good fun. But I think Steve and I were talking the other night about the TV show The Invaders, and apparently there's a new lighting kit for the Invaders model that makes everything work. The little windows around the top, the domes on the bottom, all that stuff is really cool. And uh, I was thinking, that's another TV show that terrified me as a kid. I had nightmares about the Invaders UFO landing in the front yard. And I believe one of the hallmarks of good sci-fi, good TV is to just, traumatize you as a child, which, prepares you for life. And, uh, you know, like I said, it's funny. The reason in that trailer they show the train scene. The reason that resonated so well with me was, I probably told you guys this. The first time I saw this movie, I'm 8 or 9 years old. We're watching it on black and white Zenith. Me and my dad were laying on his bed, and it's up against the wall, just like that, watching it. And it had already started, because back in those days, you guys might remember, it wasn't like today. We just hit play. And you flipped the channel. What was on, and you caught it when you caught it. And we were already at the train scene. So the first scene I remember seeing is the train engineers. I'm like, oh, it's a black and white movie about a Japanese train. I see the two engineers, and then I see the gigantic foot come down in front of him. I'm like, what? And I see him scream and crash into him. I'm like, oh, this is a monster movie. And I was like, wow. But when Perry Mason, Raymond Burr's in the building, talk about it, I see him over the building looking down and crushing him. Like, that just terrified the snot out of me. And, Godzilla had a fan forever. And then the same thing with the Invaders. We'd watch that, and David Vincent, a man too long without sleep. And I saw the, I think they had the creep factor dialed up to 11. You're country road by yourself. You see it. No one believes you. And just everything that, they just knew how to push your fear buttons. Ah, God, I miss that kind of writing. They didn't rely on gore or jump scares. I mean, it was genuine. They understood psychology, what really terrifies people, and sells kit models. And a lot of psychologists have said that it's good that people, that kids build models of this stuff, because it helps them overcome their fear of it. That's why they had a psychologist telling the Aurora Frankenstein monsters, and the kids build them. They feel like they're in control. And it's whatever it takes to push the styrene, right? But I agree with them, though. You build a model of it, you feel like you're in control, and then you can kind of enjoy the movies. I think the worst thing they did, I don't know, from a marketing standpoint, reimagining these creatures. I just heard Honey screaming outside, but. To reimagine these creatures as anti-heroes and maybe even good guys, I'm not sure that doesn't take something away from them. Some people like that, some don't, and I'm not even going so far as Godzilla doing the river dance or the thumbs up or that stuff. That was obviously aimed at 8-year-olds. But I'm just thinking about a lot of the villains, the traditional villains we had, Maleficent and the rest of them. All of a sudden, they humanize them, give them their backstory. Maybe they're not so bad. I'm kind of like, well, it's true that your villain is nuanced, but I wouldn't call Godzilla actually a villain. In fact, most of these creatures aren't villains. Think about it, okay? I know I've harped on this before, but Godzilla's down at the bottom of the ocean minding his own business, and we start setting off nukes. King Kong was literally abducted from his home. The green slime is fat, dumb, and happy, being a bubbly goo on the surface of a dead asteroid before we go and bring it back and charge it with magic electrons that turned it into these creatures. So a lot of these movies, you realize, I mean, the Creature in the Black Lagoon, another abductee, you know, I mean, talk about trafficking. And you realize that, and definitely it was at 20 million miles to Earth or whatever, where they come back with the sulfur-eating monster. And I mean, they went and grabbed, you know, if we just leave these creatures alone, we wouldn't have half these problems. Of course, you wouldn't have a movie either. And, and even Frankenstein, he didn't ask to be put together. So, you know, yeah, you know, maybe it's not so bad. They made, they changed some of these characters around. Did we find another snake? No. Well, what Honey's been finding lately is these little millipedes, but she won't touch them. She watches them. And I found out that these little millipedes put off a sort of a cyanide odor as a defense mechanism, so cats smell it and they stay away from them. So she just watches them go by. We got the bug man coming by tomorrow. But that's Florida. Florida, you get critters. That just goes to the territory. Lizards and a couple of snakes. I mean, it's just kind of like, Tuesday. Yeah, they do have giant snakes in Florida. In fact, they just grabbed a reticulated python down in the Glades. Those are an invasive species. They're not natural to Florida. People buy them. They get too big. They just let them go. And they do quite well in the Everglades, but unfortunately they're a competition for the natural animals that are here. Crocodiles make quick work of them, but I imagine alligators do too. But those are about the only things that can. And there have been some pretty big ones caught. And I think I was in the news a while back, not that long ago. They caught like a 12-footer, which of course for a reticulated python isn't even all that big. Or maybe it was an anaconda. But Florida's the Australia of the United States. Yeah, we got sharks, we got crocs, we got gators. Our crocodiles are what they call saltwater crocs. And contrary to what some people like to say, they are native to Florida. They a lot of them swim up from South America, but they've seen them out, and they've seen 3-footers in the open ocean, just paddling along, and they finally realized that although they're not as common as alligators, they are. I mean, yes, people did buy the little caimans you could buy at the zoo for $2, and my brother had one. He froze to death, because yes, we up in North Florida we do get very cold winters. But we called him George, and we're going down feeding him little bits of hamburger. But the caimans will get set and free, so we have a pretty good population of those also. But I think caimans are native to the area also, but they're not. Alligators and all those reptiles are cannibals. They'll even literally eat their own young. So they say they have to get about 3 feet long before they're relatively safe from cannibalism. But we learned a few years back that not only do we have the alligator. When I was growing up, alligators were on the endangered list, and it turned out they never should have been. And as a result of being protected, they wound up getting overpopulated and really big. We've had 12-footers, 11, 12-footers, which after about 3 or 4 feet, they're capable of taking a human. They certainly take a puppy dog, which seems to be one of their favorite treats. So, yeah. And this is why Florida allows open carry. And you're going out in the Everglades, you best be packing. Because you get out there, you are nothing but self-propelled protein. Let's see. Trump versus the giant spiders. I do love the giant tarantula movie with Agar. I just watched a video today on the actor William Hopper, and even though he's best known as Paul Drake in the Perry Mason TV show, he did a couple of sci-fi movies. The one we just talked about I think that was 20 Million Miles to Earth, and also of course he was in was he the one in Deadly Menace? I think that was him in Deadly Menace. Sometimes I get my old sci-fi movies a little confused, but he actually did a little bit of everything. And I used to see those a lot. They repeated them a lot on set, so I became a fan. At the time, I didn't realize that in Giant Tarantula that Clint Eastwood, he can't see him because he's got the oxygen mask on, was the flight leader in the stock footage morphing Air Force that attacked. 1 minute they're F-80, then they're F-94s, then they're F-86s, then they're F-84s, then they're Cougars. Like, pick a service already. But yeah, that's exactly right. I was bored. Giant Mantis. Yeah, that movie, I watched it again recently. I'm thinking, that movie's actually better than it had any right to be. There was I love when they get that thing off the Mantis's arm, but it's that big. It takes them forever to figure out what the heck it is because, for obvious reasons, but once they figure it out, And, it's funny. There's two movies where a giant flying creature goes after an airplane. There's a cargo plane. There's Giant Mantis, and there's the Giant Claw. And they're really on opposite ends of the spectrum. Giant Mantis actually holds up pretty well. That scene where they're dancing, you see the thing coming through the window, but no one else notices. I'm like, creep factor. And then you got the Giant Claw, which is, it is Ed Wood bad. That's right. Hedda Hopper was her father. I actually met Bill Katz, who I think was his son, if I'm not mistaken. But he's the one that played The Greatest American Hero, which was an interesting little show. But if I had the rights to it, there are so many creatures that have not been modeled, including, I think they should do Carl Kolchak and all the creatures he went up against as they appeared on the show. Because Night Stalker still has plenty of fans. And Kolchak, the Night Stalker, it actually ran under 2 titles. And the last one, the Sentinel, that's one that would be good to remake if you could get a better costume. The costume was so bad. But the whole thing about him being trapped, underground with it and everything, it was just, again, Kolchak's one of those shows that knew how to pop that creep factor on you. Now, in fact, Kolchak the Night Stalker was the impetus for Chris Carter's The X-Files. That's why Mulder was kind of the odd man out. He wanted someone like Kolchak who never got any support from, everybody was trying to cover up what he was trying to expose. And there are a couple of shows, like, The Invaders, David Vincent, a guy who couldn't get the proof. No one believed him or didn't want to believe him. And that adds a certain loneliness and a fear factor to these shows. Can you imagine when you're trying to tell if you actually saw something like this, trying to explain it to the authorities without getting tossed in a rubber room? The room with the mattress wallpaper and the one sleeve jacket that wraps around. Quartermace movies, those are absolutely good ones. Yeah, the Giant Claw was just horrible. He's so bad it's good. Again, though, the Giant Claw is one of those that if you took just the basic concept, came up with a better looking creature, you could run with it. It's not the worst plot line out there. A lot of these shows had some really interesting plot lines, and but sometimes I'll just watch clips from them, and I just love it. They're so bad they're good. And then you watch ones like Green Slime, and you're like, man, give them credit. Bad green screen, bad special effects, the toy-looking rockets and everything. But by God, the actors they're taking it serious, and they're working it as hard as they can, and God bless them for it. And of course, the women in those movies tend to be, Hammer Girl hot. Let's face it. Hammer, which, by the way, that studio is still around, unlike API or AIP. They're still around, and they knew what they were doing. Everything about that, and but being British is just a certain panache, and come on, you just you can't go wrong with some of the actors that they had, and you got Grand Moff Tarkin. Doesn't get any better than that. But which is ironic if you ever see a picture of Christopher Lee and he the two, Dracula, and the size difference between these two guys was immense. But and he was apparently just such a refined British gentleman, and you see him in all these roles. By the way, that Dracula was actually an OSS operative in World War II. He only passed away recently in his mid to late 90s. Tough guy. But pretty tall. And you see him next to his co-stars, and he just dwarfs them. And that's why I had to get him in the coffin with the hammer while he's asleep, because I can't reach you when you're standing up. But I cannot believe I'm brain farting. His name was Christopher Lee, and this is embarrassing. I'm going to have to go get more cough medicine. This is just unsweet tea. Project Head Christopher George from 1967. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah, it's a funny thing. There are a lot of movies that are not B movies that we call B movies. And a lot of folks, especially today, don't even know what a B movie is. I know a lot of you guys know, but the B movie. Oh, I actually watched a clip from Horror Express, and I was like, again, better than it had any right to be. Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Thank you. And Peter Cushing is this very slight build little man, and Christopher Lee is this towering muscular fellow. And I think if you go into Hammer Studios today, like if I understand correctly, you go into the atrium or into their lobby, and there's a big picture of the two of them standing. You see the size difference, and they were very good friends. But they said that Cushing, even though he does a magnificent job of playing Grand Moff Tarkin, this purely evil individual. Yet they said it shows what a good actor he was, because he said in person he was humble and polite and convivial, and everybody that met him loved him. And he and his wife just adored each other. It was everything it's supposed to be. And Christopher Lee with this unbelievably colorful background. The only other actor I know that had a background as colorful as Christopher Lee's might be Sterling Hayden from, Dr. Strangelove. And Hayden had worked in the OSS. And what I didn't realize was Hayden had been a sailor. And he loved being out on the ocean. He was an active and veteran sailor. And he said he always considered himself a sailor. He only acted to make money. And I always found Sterling Hayden kind of he was great in his role in Dr. Strangelove. He was perfect for that role. But the other stuff I've seen him in, he just seemed, as I believe one Blue Trooper said, he seemed constipated. But but he never liked the whole Hollywood thing. And General Ripper. But it's but these, of course, some of it's generational, because they all worked during. I think David Niven, Clark Gable had flown missions in a B-17. Jimmy Stewart was a bomber pilot. I mean, these guys all had pretty colorful backgrounds, and I'm sure that helped with making them more convincing in their roles. I think one of the reasons that Tom Selleck can still sell it as a fighter pilot is because he is a pilot and he owns a Mustang, or owned. I think he might have sold. No, I think he had two of them. I think he sold one of them. Anyway, whatever. So, I can remember walking into the theater when those Hammer films were on, and I was like, "Oh, this is terrible! I can't watch that." And then you'd see some girl, I'm like, "Well, okay, I can watch it a little longer." And I was like 9. But you got to give those guys credit. The budgets they worked on. That is why I have such a love affair with API and Hammer and all these companies that put out these genuinely independent films. They did it quickly. They did it under budget. They made money. They ran it like a business, but they managed to stay creative, which is something that I know I'm going to sound like the typical middle-aged guy complaining about Hollywood, But so much of the stuff that comes out today is just not inspired. Like, yeah, you've got a lot of flashy special effects, bad dialogue, cut and paste actors, two-dimensional bad guy. It's just, give me an old Hammer film or an API film. Maybe it's cheesy special effects, cardboard sets. But by God, the writers and the actors are working with heart. I didn't know Don Rickles was on PT boats. Dracula Dead and loving it. So Niven was a commando. I knew he had a colorful background. And a lot of people don't know that President Nixon was a PT boat officer. It's ironic that he and Kennedy were both PT boat officers and competing for the presidency. It's a small world, huh? Nixon had a reputation as a deadly poker player. And the other person that had that reputation was Admiral Yamamoto. Having a man bite another man on you is considered homoerotic, and therefore they change the scene. Huh! Well, I guess, given the times, I can see that. I'm sure that broke Christopher Lee's heart. One of the things I've noticed about the British films is they're excellent in historical stuff because they have such a keen eye for history. Something that a lot of American producers just, God, some of the continuity mistakes I've seen in big dollar American movies really was like MacArthur supposed to be landing at Incheon and they just use some stock footage and the Americans are moving up the hill in modern uniforms with M16s. So it's like it takes you right out of the film. You don't even have to be a military expert to catch that one. I would not play. Yeah, no, I wouldn't either. I think Charles Durning might have been a ranger. Yeah, and Kurt Vonnegut. He wrote Slaughterhouse 5 after being hidden in a slaughterhouse during a bombing raid. So what he did. The Gorgon, yeah. Yeah, those are, and they've kind of become classics. One of the nice things about that era is they were cranking a lot of films so you can have these huge libraries. Never see the same thing twice. The actors were capable of pulling off the roles believably. God, I think it was Horror Express when he's telling the suspect to everyone. He goes, "What about you?" "Not us. By God, man, we're British." I love that the how indignant he was about how could you accuse us? We're British. That was great. And that movie was I was like, what? And the reason I got into Horror Express was not only because the folks here talked about it, and I love that one line, but also was because of the model work. That obviously a lot of the exterior footage was models, and it's some of it now doesn't maybe hold up quite as good, with our eyes for models you can sort of see, but some of the scenes, especially the longer shots, hold up pretty well. Good model work. Speaking of model train work, the movie Asteroid City, there's several YouTube videos out there about the making of it, and that they use a huge model train. That's a model that they're using, and that's huge. I mean, each car is like 4 feet long, so the old saying, the bigger the model, the better it looks on camera. But they have a... no, yeah, you're right. It's a war. Slaughterhouse 5 is not exactly a war story. War is just one of the stories. Yeah, oh God. Okay, JM, since you brought that up, now you guys know, I mean, we have that movie with Ben Affleck, the movie whose name we do not mention. I don't even count that. That movie is so bad on so many levels. When they did the recent movie Midway, they did a lot right and they included some important things, but I was really disappointed at what they did. I mean, they go through all the trouble to build a 100% scale mock-up of a TBD-1 Devastator, which has a very authentic look, and so when they're walking around it on the carrier deck, it all looks right. Okay, that's fine. But then when they go to the CGI of it flying and attacking the Japanese, it's carrying a pair of what looked to be damn near 500 pounders and a torpedo. Now, it could carry either or, but it never had wing racks. The SBD did, but it never had wing racks for bombs. The bombs, it was a torpedo or a bomb. The bombs went up where the torpedo would be if you're. That's why they had that middle seat. That was for a bombardier. He actually had a bomb sight. That's one of the reasons the airplane has that guppy look on front behind the engine. It's sort of jowly. There was doors that popped open to expose the bomb sight. So it could do level bombing like the Japanese Kate torpedo plane / level bomber. Or you could drop the bombs off, put a torpedo in which case you didn't need the guy in the middle seat. Now, this thing could barely lumber off the deck with a torpedo. There's no way it would. If that thing had tried to take off with torpedo and bombs on the wings, it probably would have wound up in the water. And then they don't even use those bombs. They drop their torpedoes and then fly away with the bombs still on. I'm like, rolling? WTF, bruh? And I think that was just, he just liked the way it looked. I'm like, you created this out of CGI. You added expense by adding these features that are historically incorrect and you didn't even use and certainly didn't need. And getting back to the B-25s, this is CGI. Why are you using the wrong airplane? And on top of that, if you notice, the markings are all wrong. They go through the trouble to put on the side of the plane, the star with the red dot. Okay, that's correct. But when you see the planes flying, you're looking down on them. They got the star, if I remember correctly, they got the star and bar on the wings, which didn't come out till 43, 44. I'm like, what up? I ain't even gonna talk about that other movie because that was just so bad on so many levels. Oh God, I hate that movie. But yeah, when you're doing CGI, there's no excuse for not getting it right. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just not. And a lot of people are like, you're just getting lost in minutia. I know, but it takes me out of the movie and for no good reason. You're going out of your way to create an inaccuracy. I can forgive a lot in the movies when they haven't, they're on a budget and they're trying to use real planes, like in Where Eagles Dare, which is a movie I really enjoy because I'm sure the OSS issued lots of bombs that were sticks of dynamite with stopwatches and tripwires on them. I mean, standard OSS issue, right? No, they would have used plastique or something. Anyway, okay, I don't care. That's not a big deal. And I don't care that when they're escaping at the airport, all the German fighters happen to look remarkably like, AT-6 Texans. At least in the movie A Bridge Too Far, when the Allied British RAF fighters are attacking the German artillery, they mocked them up to look kind of like they look kind of like womerangs or boomerangs, something that the Commonwealth might have had, by covering up the back canopy and making them look like single seaters. They go, yeah, you can tell they're T6s, but still, at least they made the effort to make it look more like a fighter. And she's back there meowing now. But you cut them some slack because, hey, look, there's not that many, of the proper, if any, of the proper aircraft around. One of the things I liked about that Brad Pitt movie where he's the Lysander pilot flying the spy missions, I forget the name of it. It's kind of forgettable and pretty far-fetched, but still, at least they used a real Lysander. I mean, an airplane that was appropriate and everything. My brother built a Lysander model from Hawk. Always enamored with that airplane. Probably because it's so ungainly. Probably the same reason I like the Stuka. He said, yeah, the Stuka is an airplane that's so ugly it needs to be shot down just for making the sky look ugly. There's a kit bash. A Stuka as a crop duster. And you can do the same thing with a Lysander. Exactly the kind of airplane they might make a crop duster out of. Big engine, big wing, a lot of lifting power, fixed gear, hang some sprayers off of it, put the hopper in the back, and that'd be an interesting little kit bash. But so movies that have to use real stuff get Von Ryan's Express are being attacked by Messerschmitt 108s. Yeah, I mean, that's what they had. Okay, at least it's a German airplane. It was made by Messerschmitt. I mean, yeah, it's technically inaccurate. I love the Germans with a gigantic gun sight up front. Bit comical, but okay, But you let them slide. At least they're using real airplanes making low passes. Yeah, TBD Firebomber. Yeah, I actually saw some. Kevin will probably talk about Don Yost. I actually don't know that much about him other than he was fighting cancer and that some folks I know loved him, some didn't care for him. But he did great work. Major. Yeah. By the way, speaking of Hollywood and real effects, it's funny when a movie like Catch 22, goes that hard to get 14 or 16 flying B-25s and real footage and some surprisingly good aerial footage. And I'm thinking, this is a comedy that is a movie that could have been forgiven for making mistakes, but they actually went out of their trouble to do it right. But I've heard it said that the most dangerous stunt ever in an airplane or airplanes ever done in movie history was the mass takeoff scene in Catch 22, which I think was filmed in either Mexico or Spain. Anyway, I think it was 16 I think it was a full squadron or 16. It might have been 14. But they lined them all up on the runway. And I read an article about this back in the 70s. And when they did that takeoff scene, you'll notice that in the real world, the way bomber squadrons would take off is the first airplane gets roaring down the runway. And he gets a pretty good ways down, pretty much the lift off. The next one goes right behind him. And they're eating each other's prop, wash, and wake, but you can handle that. But you don't have two guys rolling down the runway at the same time, because if one of them chokes an engine or something or aborts the takeoff, everybody's going to go piling up into him. Well, they said that that movie was made in the late 60s, early 70s. So you've got a bunch of 25, 30-year-old B-25s, half of which they got out of boneyards and got them in flying conditions. So probably not the best maintained planes in history or best mechanically reliable. You put that many of them on a runway and you have them start rolling 2 or 3 seconds with overlapping wingtips. Well, not overlapping, but I mean, one airplane can't go past the other without clipping him. The runway wasn't wide enough. And you see them roaring down the runway, and you have all 14 or 16 of them in motion on the asphalt at the same time. Now, some of them are airborne before the tail end Charlies got rolling, but still, at one point, you had like a dozen airplanes rolling that runway, and if one of them had crapped an engine or lost a prop control, they were instructed in the briefing: if you lose an engine or whatever, just bury the rudder and get it off the runway, or you're going to have everybody else pilot. And then once you're off the runway, cut the power and hammer the brakes, because you're going to have everybody piling up on you if you try to stop on the runway. There was not enough room for them to get stopped. And they said, given when you count the number of piston, cylinder, spark plugs, crankshaft, propeller blades, governor mechanisms, everything, plus possible human error, the fact that all those airplanes rolling down the runway at the same time was probably the most dangerous stunt ever done in the history of Hollywood. And don't forget, if one of the lead planes had piled up, you're not talking about 1 or 2 planes having an accident. You're probably talking about 6 or 7. It would have been real bad. So, and if I'm not mistaken, they actually had guys sitting, because they knew you'd be able to see the nose glass. I think they actually had guys sitting in the noses, so there were probably at least 3 people on each airplane. Certainly 2. And but it's kind of sad that a movie like Catch 22 has better effects and more attention to detail than the serious movies. Did they ever use the SB-2C for firefighting or crop protection? No, to my knowledge, they did not. And I will tell you why. The SB-2C was called the son of a bitch second class for a reason. A lot of the guys that flew it wanted their old SBD-5s back. Whereas the Dauntless was slower, couldn't go as far or as fast, and it couldn't carry as much. It was a pilot's airplane. It was a dream to fly. Very stable in the dive. The SB-2C was much less forgiving, trickier to fly, and don't get me wrong, from a military standpoint, it went further, it went faster, and it carried more. And of course, it had an internal bomb bay. But they had nothing but problems with the airplane, and as soon as the war was over, they got rid of them. I think the Argentines, the Greeks, the Turks, several other navies around the world got them. Most of them went to the chopper. Only one still survives today that's flying. Belongs to the Commemorative Air Force, what used to be the Confederate Air Force. And Although I'd love a chance to fly something like that, all the guys who flew them, none of them had too much good to say about them. They much preferred the more stable Douglas product, even if the Helldiver was more competent. But a thing to point out, in fairness to the Helldiver, which still did its job, so props for that. The dive bombers in general went away right at the end of World War II. And I was always curious about that because you didn't see any dive bombers in Korea or Vietnam. The dive bomber concept was actually fairly short-lived. It was first used, I think, by the Marines, I believe, in Nicaragua in the late 20s, early 30s, one of the Banana Wars, and with surprising effect. It was basically long-range artillery. Now you think about it. The idea of artillery is to drop a shell on a target. And, a good field piece can have a good 10, 12, 15-mile range on it. But you got to have a spotter, you got to have communication. Normally you got to blow up a whole area to hit a target because it's not that accurate. Somebody realized that, hey, level bombing, yeah, you can sort of see the target and, maybe hit. But if you point the whole airplane at it, and drop low, close to the target, much higher hit rate. So by the late 20s, early 30s, the concept of the dive bomber, pardon the pun, taken off. And there were, every country had their own version of the dive bomber. Main thing was very strong wing and a dive brake. And it was an excellent way to hit either a moving target, like a ship, which is one of the reasons the Navy heavily invested in dive bombers. And it was a good way to pinpoint a specific target, which is one of the reasons the Germans were such big users of the dive bomber. And one British officer in North Africa was watching Stukas just roll out of formation one after the other and just blow the snot out of a target. And he leaned over his commanding officer and goes, you must admire the Teutonic precision with which they do things. It was very businesslike. But dive bombers had a lot of problems. By nature, they tended to be slow. And since they had to have really strong wings, a lot of times they couldn't have folding wings. The SBD was one of the first dive bombers with folding wings. But so that meant you had to have local air superiority because dive bombers had trouble defending themselves, as we learned, as every Air Force that used them learned repeatedly. A lot of the naval battles. People talk about all the TBD torpedo planes that were wiped out at Midway. They forget we lost almost half of our SBDs. So there were definitely limitations. The other thing was, but it was used as, the Air Force had their version, was the A-24 Banshee, which was the Air Force, the denavalized version of the Dauntless. And the Air Force didn't really like them that much. The Navy loved them, but one of their conditions was it had to be able to get off an aircraft carrier. So, again, thick wing, a lot of lift, means you're not going to go that fast. The Air Force, on the other hand, was using runways, and although the airplanes could hit the target, that wasn't the problem. They were slow and they were vulnerable. They wanted something faster, so the Air Force started moving towards putting bombs on fighter planes and teaching fighter pilots how to dive on a target. Now, it was less accurate, but there was a much higher survivability, and a lot of these airplanes carried 2 bombs. Navy kind of started doing the same thing with Corsairs, and after a while they realized that towards the end of the war, the dive bomber, especially in the Navy, was still good for trying to hit a ship. But technology was changing, TV-guided missiles and things were in their infancy, but as soon as the war was over, they were like, you know what? We don't need this. We're going to have an airplane that could do everything. That was a Sky Raider, but actual conventional dive bombing had just kind of, as weapons technology advanced, it just wasn't a thing anymore. And of course, then the jets came in, but actual dive bombing actually only went from, I guess, the late 20s to 45, so roughly call it a 20-year window, and when it just basically got replaced by technology. But in that window, it did a lot of yeoman work for all the services. The Stuka, which should have been retired by 39, stayed in service throughout the duration of the war because it was still great for dropping a bomb right on a target. And again, it was just long-range artillery. Now you think about it. This is one of the big arguments between the big gun club, the battleship boys, and the Airedales. Battleships got these 9 gigantic guns. They can lob around 22, 26 miles, whatever. That's an impressive thing to be sure. But an aircraft carrier can launch, 36 dive bombers 200 miles. They can see the target. They can track it. And normally if only 1 or 2 of the bombs hits the target, as the Japanese learned at Midway, that's usually enough to do the job. So there was, definitely time and place for that. And that kind of is what put battleships out of business. Now, there are still things battleships do better. One of which is a battleship can go off the coast of the country and just sit on station, gunboat diplomacy. And if it has to, when it comes to just dropping order, like Normandy invasion, several other invasions, the battleship prep, you're not going to do that with airplanes. That's because they're just sitting there, 9 rounds. But if the target's 200 miles away, the aircraft carrier sends out an airplane, maybe some torpedo bombers or torpedo planes. You remember virtually every torpedo plane, the Avenger, the Devastator, the Val, the Susie, all of them had the option of a torpedo or bombs. And that was just kind of standard. But anyway. Most of the movies... Still instructed dive bombing at AT-3 in the mid-90s. Yeah, the technique hadn't gone away. But the dedicated dive bomber has. Oh, that's another thing. If you wanted to see something that could be considered a dedicated dive bomber today, the A-10. Or the F-15E for that matter. And the F-18. The FA-18. They all have an attack mode. And it's essentially dive bombing. And it's pretty accurate. But they're not dedicated dive bombers. The technique's still probably the easiest way to get a bomb on target. Of course, I'm assuming you're not dropping laser guided or something like that. Which, it's still, there's something to be said for dumb bombs. And, laser guided's great when you're trying to put something through a window, but when you got infantry in the open, just all over the area. Put them everywhere. That was Puff the Magic Dragon. The whole idea originally was to chase... infantry in the open, just fly a circle around and keep... It became air-based defense and hamlet defense because when the officer who was giving the briefing to LeMay was getting ready to go in, he heard them arguing in the office. They'd lost a bunch of airplanes to sappers. They had no way of protecting the airfields. And so at the last second, he's like, I've got an idea. Inspiration struck. He's like, General, I have a new idea for air-based defense. And it turned out to be the airplane's forte. Steel on target. You think about it, and I'd said this before, there's the old advertisement in the Aerosphere 1943 that our family had. Just shows an artwork of a 50 caliber bullet flying through the air, and he goes, for this, bullet to fly through the air to hit that target, it had to be fired by gunpowder by an airplane that was made by this and, flown by that, and everything was powered by gasoline, and, and it just goes through the whole logistics chain all to get that bullet on target. And when you think about how much or how little ordnance of what's fired actually inflicts damage on a target, and you look at the mass infrastructure of the military, and the funding and training and everything else, and time and blood and treasure that was invested so that military machine could drop that piece of ordnance on a target. And which is really, in the end, what it's about, is the chieftain would say, steel on target. And it's almost kind of embarrassing in a way. We build these big ships that can fly these big jets that can drop these big bombs just so we can get that little warhead beep, through somebody's window. And in days of yore, what was it, 2% of bombs on a lot of daylight missions were hitting within a mile of the target. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Norden bomb sight was one of the most expensive development programs in military history for its time. So, and then somebody slaps 3 miniguns into a dilapidated World War II C-47, and it rewrites the entire war. You never know. You might say that given what it cost, the Puff the Magic Dragon probably had the greatest economy of putting rounds on target for money invested of any weapon system ever invented. In the Second World War, if there's one thing the Army is good at, it is research. They do all kinds of studies and research and to fight the better war. And they're really good at it, too. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pulling this off the top of my head, but this is one of the things about arming going from semi-automatic to fully automatic, like the M1 Garand to the M16. In World War II, I believe it was 25,000 rounds of rifle ammunition was fired for every bullet that hit an enemy soldier. In Vietnam, it was 250,000. Now, I don't know if that's true. That's just something I read somewhere. But, you see all the footage of the guy just holding the triggers down and shooting into the bushes. And don't forget, a lot of those bullets are fired just to keep the enemy's head down or dissuade them. So, but anyway. He said the Panzer lead. Panzer head. Oh, okay. I thought it was Panzer lead. No, the SBDs did not have folding wings. They had a carry-through wing spar. And I don't think the 5 had one either. One way you can tell a 5 at a glimpse, if I'm not mistaken, is it does not have the carburetor scoop on the cowling. It has a smooth, round cowling with no intake at the top for the carburetor scoop, I believe. And the later models burned more gas, actually had a little bit shorter range, but they could perform better. Originally a Jack Northrop design. Mike Mashack covered all that. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. The AC-40 are the most effective truck destroyers out there. And don't forget, I would rather drop a bomb that blew up a truck full of munitions than drop a bomb that wiped out an infantry squad. Because you're talking about taking out, 4 or 5 guys that can be quickly replaced versus thousands of rounds of ordnance and ammunition that it's harder for them to replace. And although the Ho Chi Minh Trail, as I'm sure all of you know, wasn't a trail. It was a 20-mile wide band of jungle with all kinds of footpaths. And they're using a $4 bicycle to move half this stuff. Yeah. Oh, by the way, one of the I think it was a Ludendorff bridge. It was the one at Remagen, right? I think that was one of the few times that the Arado 234 went and did a bombing mission, tried to hit the bridge and finish it off. Failed attempt, but it's a cool idea. But that's also where the Pershing got in some good slugs. The Pershings were at Remagen, and they threw a walloping on the other side. Somebody, I want to say it was Omar Bradley, or it might have been Dwight Eisenhower, but someone asked him what was the most important weapon system of World War II, and he said the 2.5-ton truck. As the chieftain has pointed out, and a lot of other people, military historians, you can have the best weapon system in the world. It doesn't mean diddly if you can't get it to the battlefield. Which is, of course, one reason Americans didn't have a field of heavy tank was because it would have been virtually impossible for us to transport it across the ocean. The Germans just had to put them on trains. But also, the Liberty ship, and to a lesser extent the Victory ship, the C-47, the 2.5-ton truck, and arguably maybe the Jeep, and the DUKW, the floating trucks. Those are absolutely critical systems. If it was World War II and they said, all right, Max, you're going to equip the American military, the Allies, you only get one airplane to do everything, it would have been the C-47. Because, yeah, we can survive. I mean, they could be converted into a medium bomber, but more importantly is, without a way to get the people and munitions where it needs to be, the rest is for naught. And if we can only have one vehicle, it'd be the 2.5-ton truck that go anywhere, and you need them. I mean, people forget that we were the only fully, I guess the Brits were also, but for the most part, the Allies were the only fully mechanized military out there. The They forget how much the Germans still depended on horses. All that footage you see of all the German mech and armor and the big numbers, a lot of that's propaganda footage where they got everything together in one place. And yes, they had a largely mechanized military, but not completely. A lot of their supplies are still being run by horses. And the advantage of a horse, obviously, you can feed it off on the side of the road. You don't have to worry about running out of gas, but that's about the only advantage. And it's one of the things I like about them talking about the movie Fury. He's talking about the Falaise Pie where they go around killing all the horses. It's a good mention. And that's also in the Band of Brothers when the war's basically over and they're driving through all the Germans that have surrendered, marching down the road, and some are being in wagons towed by horses, and Webb gets up on the back of the truck, and look at General Motors and Ford, you have horses. But you got to be able to get to the battlefield. The Liberty ships are absolutely critical, which is one of the reasons that anti-submarine warfare was so critical. But even the Germans admitted, even if we hadn't been sinking so many U-boats by the middle of the war, there were so many Liberty ships crossing, they just couldn't sink them all. And that's why the Hercules, the Spruce Goose, was designed, was the idea of, okay, this will replace the Liberty ship, which was never going to happen. But the logistics of the Second World War still boggle the mind. And, kid you not, the lessons learned in the Second World War had implications that a lot of folks don't stop to think about. Why do you think the C-5 Galaxy was invented? The military had learned we need heavy lifters that in a pinch. Now, technically part of the selling point of the C-5 was it could go right up to the FIBA, the forward edge of the battle area, land and drop a tank or two off. There's no way you were going to put a critical asset like that close to the shooting. But it can still get the equipment in theater. And, I'm sure most of you guys have probably seen a C-5 at an air show or something. But it can carry, and then you got the Kraft, the Civilian Reserve Air Fleet. But that's one, the rollout ships and the C-5 and these are all came about in the 60s because of lessons. These guys who were lieutenants in World War II were generals now. And they're like, hey, let me tell you what happened, when we were going into Sicily. We're not going to let that happen again. Crichton Abrams was an armor officer in the Second World War, the one that Abrams tank is named after. And when he got in charge of designing America's new tank, he was like, okay, it's going to be fast, it's going to have a big gun, and I don't want anything to be able to go through the armor. And if we got to buy a Chodom armor for the British, then so be it. And the M1 Abrams was born, which is, of course, it bears his name. But, and all of that, the M1 Abrams is another thing that it comes out of the experience in the Second World War. The Brits just lost, or not the Brits, the Ukrainians just lost their first Challenger. And, the Russians were jumping down and cheering like, great, you got one. How many hundred tanks have they lost so far? And I don't know if it was a landmine or what it was that got it. We lost an Abrams. One of my FOs had been a tanker, and he'd been in the Gulf War. And he was telling me some stories about the Abrams. And they did lose one. I think it was to a landmine. But he said they had one that got knocked out, and they gave the bailout order, but the driver couldn't get out. And the thing, all the ammo exploded and burned out, and the thing burned. And they're like, Christ, And when it was all said and done, and the fire was out, they went over there and started, pulling hatches. They pop open the driver's hatch, and he's down there going, what took you so long? They thought he was dead. The compartment protected him. He was able to keep breathing and just rode it out. And so, amazing vehicle. And I think one of the most exported tanks in the world. Good Lord, that is a good tank. But they need some money for upgrades because it's just, good as it is, you got to keep upgrading. You're going to put the trophy system on it for defense. Because an anti-tank guided missile is still a very dangerous system. My God. The weapons we've come up with in the past 20 years, just even as a fighter pilot, these all-aspect missiles and stuff, I don't care what you're flying. You shoot enough of them, somebody's going to get lucky. And some of them just have almost mythical capabilities. The F-35, of course, was basically a flying sensor platform. Apparently the stuff it can tell the pilot is pretty much next to having God's own eye in the cockpit. And you know, you can just fly around with that thing just receiving data and just transmitting through a data uplink that goes to the AWACS, that goes back down to all the other airplanes. They can launch their missiles and fire them without ever turning their radars on, just by taking this data from the sensor packages. One guy just running cold, just I'm up here, you cannot see me. And bad guys will know we're there when their airplanes start exploding. It's all about the incentives. The only problem is with airplanes that expensive, you cannot afford to lose them. Wow. Well, I have rambled on long enough. Oh, we've got 90 people watching. So, what you guys got? Anything? Yep. And, you know, up in I think it was the First World War, up in Canada, they had that munition ship explode, which I think went off the force of a small nuke and was like the biggest man-made explosion in history up to that time. Yeah, they've had it down here in the States in the 50s or 60s. We had Texas City explosion. A fertilizer ship exploded. There's several documentaries done on those. Good God. Stuff go boom. And, you know, very few of these explosives does all of the explosives actually detonate. Thank God. Honey's meowing up a storm back there. Mommy must have locked her out of the bedroom. Let's see. Let me check something real quick here. I think our next build is the ugly anything build. Ugly car, ugly plane, ugly boat. Of course, aesthetics is highly subjective. And just open this up real quick. Whoa. I don't want to give you feedback. Leave me alone. Updated build schedule. Yeah, ugly aircraft, auto, or Halloween. So you can do your monster build also, and that'll be due on Halloween. Actually, I'd like to say have that done on the 30th, so hopefully I can get the video up by Halloween, assuming I'm not working it. I'll know when I get my schedule. Then that'll be the 317 build, which I call it the 317 because I have 3 B-17s, but it's 3 of anything. Then the next one, next year in January, will be the movie scene Hollywood studio build in front of the camera or a scene from a movie. Then after that, the Mustang build and the Korean War build, Dream Car build, Wild West build. Then we have a couple other ideas. Box art build, seaplane build, that's not quite right build. If you guys have any other ideas, just send them to me. A lot of photos are coming in for the live stream. I mean, excuse me, not the live stream. A lot of photos are coming in for the next viewers build already. And guys are doing some beautiful work. Let me see real quick here. Viewers build 44. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. Oh gosh, I've got about 55, 60 photos already. And you guys are doing some really beautiful work. Here's just one of them I grabbed. Gosh, I wish I could get mine to look that good. That's a basic monogram Revell P40B that I built countless times as a kid. And just beautiful work there. Right out of the box. Slow down and take my time, give me a chance to use some of this AK plastic putty. I always thought the P40 is the Flying Tigers mark. It's just one of the most beautiful airplanes. Although I'm not sure, I think they use Chinese machine guns on them because of ammunition, so they wouldn't have trouble getting supplied. I read that in a magazine somewhere. Well, anyway, let's see. Yeah, the seaplane build is on the list. If someone did a 135 Putin, is that a monster? Yeah, he's a monster. Any painting of Putin or model of Putin I'll take as a monster build. That might be too scary. Don't want the kids to, scream. The one I'm planning to do for the seaplane build is the Atlantis repop of the Seamaster, the jet, which I think is one of the coolest looking jets ever. It's a shame they lost a crew on one of them to, I think, a runaway tail trim or something, but Yeah, John Ashley Smith, you did beautiful work on those models, that Messerschmitt and that P40. I really like that. I have never had a P40 come out that clean before. That's that's really nice, and I'm going to. One thing I will say, guys, and that's not a complaint about this photo, it just popped into my mind, is back up just a little bit. And if you have a 16:9 setting on your camera for the frame size, if you could use that. But if you back up a little bit, maybe I can get the box art and the airplane all in the frame. Anyway, not a big deal. That's just a little preference on my part. And yeah, these jewels are these William kits. A lot of flash to still scrape off the other parts. The floats have a lot of gear underneath. It's going to be these are going to take a while. I'm glad I painted that tail instead of using those decals. But it's going to this is going to be a while before this is done. I have on the table, I have Godzilla's go-kart, which I just took out because I had to play with some of the paints and test them. But that's on the table. I got still got the Arizona, but that's a slow build. I'm taking my time with that one. That's no rush. And these World Cruisers, the diorama. Since I finished the SR-71, those are really the only ones I have open. The World Cruisers are going to get most of my attention, but like I said, I got to be gone this weekend, and I go back to work a little while after that. So the joyous days off will be coming to a close. I want to get at least the World Cruiser diorama done before that. Rigging these things is going to take a while once I get the floats on them and everything. So that's one reason I'm doing them here in the house. I can get up in the morning, get my coffee, sit down, do a little work on it, then make my morning video, and then as the day goes by, I sit down, just them around, and just go do the work on them. And I don't want to rush it, but or get theiritis. But one of the nice things about the World Cruisers is a ton of reference photos, so it's really easy to get information on things. Let's see if I just turn that off. Now you can see the glowing orb behind me better. But that's all I got for now. Thank you, I appreciate that, Trey. I really do. If I do another one of those, I'll probably give it an extra day. Seal a few. I mean, you can't really see. I knew I was going to put it on a stick. It was going to look fine on the shelf, but that was a fairly straightforward. But I really enjoyed painting it, playing with all the shading and everything. And guys, I can't thank you enough for everything. I know there's some packages on the way, so I'll do unboxings with those when they show up. And gosh, I look at these models. Oh, one thing I did, pulled about 4 or 5 models off the shelf that are like, these are kind of old and rare, and they're intact and complete in the correct box and everything. I don't think I'm ever going to build these. Of the 300 plus models I have, I've got about 7 that I won't build because they're just, I'm not going to build the Hawk Beta 1. I'm not going to build the Ranchero. I'm not going to build a couple of the Keelcraft Sopwith, or a couple of the original Revell World War I models, or that missile set. Well, actually, the missile set was already started, so I really don't have any heartburn about building that one, but I've got another one that's already halfway done, so I'll probably just leave that in the box. But then again, those missile sets have different missiles. They change that thing over time. So I also want to thank Paul Adams over in New Zealand. He's been sending me a lot of great stuff, which at some point I plan to do some more videos with some of the information he sent me, but it's just only so many hours a day. And to be honest, you kind of got to be in the mood. But when I do them, I want to do them justice. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to sign off for the evening. And I'll just turn the music on and a still picture, and you guys can chat with each other for a little while, and we will call it an evening. And I want to thank everybody for coming out for this impromptu little video. I don't know how much content. May not get anything else out till next week, not only because I'm going to be gone, but also just stuff, life. it's tough having a life. So anyway, guys, once again, I appreciate you coming out this evening. I hope you had a little fun, something to do for the evening, and we will talk at you later, as always. Model on.
walked into the hobby shop, my heart came to a sudden stop. I couldn't fathom just what I was seeing. Repops of my favorite kits, the sight it damn near gave me fits. I just realized repop kits will do ya. Repops will do ya. Repops will do ya. Repops will do ya. Repops will do ya. Atlantis made the kids anew, and polar lights had done it too. The little kid inside me was screaming. My wallet was about to shrink. This was not time to overthink, and from my mind the memories were flowing. Repops will do ya. Repops will do ya. Repops will do ya. Repops will do. Old Revell and Aurora Jew, snap-tight kits that need no glue, the kits I used to make when I was young. The eBay sellers want too much for that soft, nostalgic touch, but I've learned that a repop kit, yes, will do ya. Repops 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 will do. Controller on, countdown, ignite, a light. Field scoured, no sign or trace. I sent it way up high to outer space. The stupid sun, I must have missed the shoot. Alone out in this place, searching for searchless fruit. And I'm gonna look around just one more time. Too much invested to leave it behind. I've got a plan, I think, when I get home, to save some pocket cash. Rocket back, buying rockabilities up your dough. other kind of way, so I don't always have to buy. I don't know why, I'm just a thrifty guy, a thrifty rocket guy, pointing up and grinning at the sky. It might just be a throwaway to you, but I used pins and glue, and I don't care if there's a pair of shoes or not. And all the stuff I use is secondhand. Thingamabobs I've saved to tweak. Recycle man and Rocket Geek. And it reaches apogee after a climb. This lift off proves a new theory of mine, that every trash can inside every home, is full of rocket parts. Rocket parts making missiles out of cardboard tubes. So I thought I'd send it up just one more time. The countdown singularly on my mind. My fingers crossed, the engine won't explode. Oh, oh no, like a rocket bomb. Rocket bomb returning near a pool by someone's home. And now my prototype is stuck inside a pine. And I think it was about launch number 9. It was then I heard a siren's distant whine. Sorry, officer, I didn't see the sign. It says rockets not permitted anytime. I'll be lucky if I only get a fine. This'll give me time to do a redesign. And I need a chip so all the pins align. Gotta make a print or two of the same mind. Ask my girl to tag along, but she declined.
Bye.